Hi, it's me, Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. Welcome back to Starbase, Texas. This is, of course, where SpaceX is building their Starship vehicles. This is part one of two parts. In part one, we're going to take you around the factory, see what's new, see the ships, see the boosters, see Starfactory from the inside for the first time, and just learn a lot along the way. So stay tuned for part two, where we'll take you out to the launch pad, and we'll also follow up with Elon after the launch and see how it went. So without further ado, let's go on another tour with Elon Musk. Cool. So yeah, as we were saying, I mean, obviously a lot has changed in the last couple of years. I mean, this is all. Maybe in theory, I don't know. I mean,
looks exactly the same. It hasn't changed a bit.
What once was tents is now a permanent looking factory.
Yeah, it used to be intense, and now it's in a building.
Yeah, yeah.
So we've got this, I think, pretty good looking rocket factory building that we've almost completed. We've completed the exterior. This will enable us to have serialized production of the rocket, especially the ship, which will ultimately be made, long term, probably be making 1,000 a year of the ship. So
1,000 a year.
Yeah, well, got to build a city on Mars.
Yeah, that's insane to think about.
Yeah, I mean, we may not build 1,000 a year right here, but I think this is capable of 100 a year.
Really?
Sure.
Wow.
That's only a ship every 3 days.
And
that's nothing.
And well, and it's funny because now, if you think about it, even Falcon 9 these days, you're producing a second stage about every 2 days. And a few years ago, that would have been impossible. No one would have imagined, that they're building an upper stage.
This year we'll make almost 200 upper stages of Falcon.
That's unbelievable.
And next year, probably over 200.
That's
so.
That's a cadence that people I don't think are, just even, you can't even imagine. You can't even fathom that kind of, output like that. That's just
Falcon
crazy.
9 is actually a heavy lift vehicle, so it's there's roughly 40,000 pounds to orbit.
Yeah.
Which is in the normal rocket language would be a heavy lift.
Yeah.
So now Starship's going to be able to do 100 tons to orbit with Starship 2, maybe a little more than that.
Mm-hmm.
With Starship 3, like at the 9-meter diameter, essentially when the 9-meter diameter is sort of fully stretched out to what ends up being from 120 meters total length to probably 140 or something like that. Then this is like a lot of optimizations and engine improvements, heat shield mass improvements, reducing the amount of propellant needed for landing. Kind of basically do all the things that we've somewhat done with Falcon 9, and you get to a pretty efficient vehicle. I think we'll be able to do over 200 tons to a useful orbit with Starship.
That's insane.
So, and that's with full reusability.
That's with full reusability.
Which is insane. So that's twice the Saturn V with full reusability. And full and rapid reusability. So it's the booster and the ship are coming back to the launch site.
Right. Should we take a look at what's going on in there? So, so as far as, we're seeing all this, you're talking about even version 1 maybe being able to do less than 100. But is version 1 really even going to, I feel like version 1 in my head
version
is just
1 is just to the point of, and we're really kind of Starship, we're version 1.67, I don't know.
Right,
it's like we're like many iterations through on version 1.
Yeah.
So.
And it's just a canvas. It's a test experiment still at this phase. It's just I don't think people, they see it and they don't understand that this is all just still a giant test at this stage.
Yeah, one way to look at technology is to look at it as like you're rendering an image in successive levels of detail. So the first layer of the image is very, very blurry and things are out of place, and then with the next pass, it gets a bit more defined, and things kind of shift into place. And you do another pass and another pass, and eventually it's something that is refined and actually works.
Right.
But we're in uncharted territory with Starship. So there's not like nobody's ever made a fully reusable orbital rocket.
Right.
And that's really the critical breakthrough necessary for life to become multiplanetary. For us to become a true spacefaring civilization, we have to achieve full and rapid reusability.
Yeah.
So I call it rapidly reusable, reliable rockets.
R squared. Or R
RRR.
RRR, yeah.
Pirate. Space pirates.
There we go. Yeah.
So,
and it's the thing is that people need to remember is achieving orbit's been solved. I mean, you guys have been getting to orbit for a long time. Reusing it.
Getting to orbit at all was solved in the 50s.
Right.
I mean, so I mean, I really don't think there's another point in an expendable rocket, in my opinion. Or at least I think the math clearly demonstrates that there is no point in an expendable rocket. You have to achieve reusability. We have reusability in cars, we have it in airplanes, we have it in bicycles, horses.
Yeah.
It's bizarre to not have reusability in any other form of transport. Boats. It would be insane to chuck a boat away after every trip.
Right.
But this is how rockets have worked for the vast majority of time. In fact, SpaceX is still the only rocket that has any reusability with Falcon 9.
Right.
So with Falcon 9, we bring the boosters back. We refly them frequently. We bring the fairings back. We refly those. It's only the upper stage that is expended.
Right.
Now Falcon 9 does not qualify as rapidly reusable.
Right.
Because most of the time the booster is landing on a ship in the ocean.
Right. So it takes a few days to get it back.
Yeah.
Oh, that's speeding up like crazy. I mean, the cadence out of the Cape is unbelievable.
Yeah, we're trying to squeeze every quarter of a knot that we can out of the drone ships.
Yeah.
So
seems that way.
Yeah, we're jacking up the power on the ships, streamlining them, increasing the power on the tugging vessel so we can just haul ass as quickly as possible.
Well, yeah, I think you just had your fastest turnaround just last week. There was it was something like, I don't remember the time, but it was something like 2 days or something from catching back and then out to catch again. It was just insane. It used to take so much longer, and those are all those little things that people just aren't necessarily paying attention to that are continually improving. And the
SpaceX Falcon team is doing an incredible job of achieving fast turnaround reusability given the architecture.
Yeah.
Now, that's still, however, a couple days to get a booster back, and then at least a few days to refurbish it for flight is still not rapid by aircraft or vehicle. If you take cars, boats, planes.
Right.
Doing a trip every 4 days would not cut it in a car.
Right.
Or an aircraft.
Right.
With Starship, the booster comes back to the launch site, is caught by the arms. This would be quite spectacular to see. Giant Mechazilla arms catching a rocket in midair, and then those arms put it back on the launch site, so you can have the booster back on the launch mount it's gonna come back and land in 5 or 6 minutes.
Right.
So then you'll probably get it back on the launch site in. Well, if you really push it, you can probably get it back on the launch site in 10 minutes.
Right.
Or even 5 minutes. And then you can fill it up in half an hour. So you could be ready to go an hour later from the booster standpoint. And then if you've got ships lined up, you can drop another ship on, fill it with propellant. And in theory, you could be launching every couple hours.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine now, but it was hard to imagine where Falcon 9 is today. 10 years ago, no one would have imagined what Falcon 9 is doing now. So I think time will tell that you can just keep chipping away at all those little improvements. And so, do you think you'll actually fly?
Falcon 9 used to have reusability measured in months, then weeks, then days, and then for Falcon 9, the architecture is limited to you really can't compress it down less than several days.
Right.
When you take the landing out to sea and then the necessary refurbishment of the booster that is required. So with Starship, we'll take it from days to hours.
Wow.
Do you think? So then the ship has to go around the Earth, and depending upon what orbit it has, it's got to have a ground track that comes back over the launch site.
Right.
So that could take several orbits. So the ship could take several hours, sometimes half a day or something like that to come back.
Reline, yeah.
Yeah, so you'd want to have a lot more ships than boosters.
Yeah.
So if you're really going for max launch rate, you probably want roughly, 5 ships for every booster. Yeah.
And that's what you guys are building a pretty massive cadence here of ships and boosters already.
Yeah.
Now, do you think?
Well, yeah, it's pretty slow compared to what it will be, like very slow. But we're also iterating the design, so like each one is a little different from, in some cases, a lot different from the last one.
Yeah. Are any of these what are any of these going to be the V2 yet? Are we starting to get close to some V2 hardware yet, or?
Yeah. The stretch version is basically V2. Well, I guess it depends on whether we call it V2 or don't call it V2. The slightly stretched version is V2, ugly. So, yeah. So you can see, what we have here is a Starship with, you've seen the heat shield side and the non-heat shield side.
Yep.
It's got the what we call the PEZ dispenser for tossing out the next generation Starlink satellites, the V3 satellites. So those will be very wide diameter, like sort of, I don't know, 7-meter diameter satellites.
Yeah.
So 22 feet or something like that.
Right.
So
are these actually going to be like? Are we hoping to see after? Let's say this test goes well tomorrow. Do you think the next one's actually going to go for orbit and start deploying testing out, trying to deploy Starlink, or are we? Where do you think we're in that whole mix? Like, is that maybe a few more down the road to start actually deploying payloads into orbit?
We'll see how this mission goes. I mean, this year is not about delivering satellites for Starship. It's all about ironing out the design question marks. Mm-hmm. So the major things that remain to be solved for Starship. The single biggest one is what does it take to get through the high heating of reentry? Mm-hmm. So you can see the heat shield that we have there. We have some, let's say that unsolved questions on the heat shield. A bunch of which we don't even know that they are questions, and some we're aware of because there have been challenges in the past, like with Space Shuttle. The sort of the hinge area and the hinge gap, and sealing that hinge gap and not having hot gas just go flowing super fast through the
interface there.
Yeah, at where the flap hinge is.
Yep.
Because if you get hot gas flowing through rapidly, that'll cook anything, including the tiles. So you've got a block. We've got a hot gas seal at the forward and rear flap hinge, and so one of the key questions is, does that seal work?
Right.
We think it'll work, but it may not work. Then there are some, questions of like how well do the tiles stay on?
Right.
There's a fundamental challenge here where the tiles are ceramic, so they're very brittle. They're like a coffee cup,
right,
or a dinner plate.
Yeah.
So you've got essentially a whole bunch of dinner plates stuck to a steel surface. The steel surface is getting cryogenically cold because of the propellants, so it's shrinking.
Yeah.
So on ascent, the rocket has shrunk.
Yeah.
So you can't have the gaps in the tiles be too tight, mm-hmm. or they will just shatter against each other.
Yeah.
The gap will be too tight.
Yep.
Then when it's coming in for landing, the shuttle, you no longer have the cryogenic propellant in the main tanks, mm-hmm. and the tiles get very hot.
Yep.
So now they want to expand.
Yep.
So you've got a contracted inner surface and expanding tiles.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Right. So and the thing is, like, you can't have a big tile gap because then the plasma will get in there and melt the primary structure behind it.
Exactly.
So like, what's the right tile gap? And that's going to vary depending upon where you are on the rocket, on the ship. So it's going to be like some parts of the ship have cryogenic propellant, some don't. Yeah. There's also how well do the tiles attach? If we attach them and we accidentally break one, but it's hard to see, then that could be an issue.
Right.
and we currently think we're probably not resilient to failure to loss of a tile in the hot sections of the ship that are the tank portion. So
The pressurized areas.
yeah, the pressurized areas,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and so technically the nose will be pressurized too. So if the pressurized areas lose a tile and then you melt that area, that'll cause it to pop.
Right.
So the ship will explode.
Yeah.
So now people have asked, like, why are there some missing tiles in the rear of the ship?
Well, like right now, Flight 4, you got
Yeah.
I think 3 tiles missing right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are in the rear of the ship, which is
At the
an
skirt part,
unpressurized
right?
region.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an unpressurized region where we think we can see. Well, you can have a melt through of the unpressurized region, and it will not cause failure of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Like you might have a little hole there or something.
Right.
But it's not going to pop the vehicle.
Right. So you're literally doing it as like an A/B test, almost of like,
Yeah, we wanna
what
see-
happens if we're
Yeah.
missing
What
a
happens if
tile?
you lose a tile?
Huh.
Now, we do have plans for a secondary shield beneath the tiles that is much better than what we have right now. So right now and some of this I can't say the details of it because it's like ITAR control, it's sort of
Right.
secret. But the current material we use, we think is not resilient to a tile failure. We have a new design that we think is resilient to a tile failure.
So behind the underlying structure.
Yeah, and essentially it's got ablative. So if you lose the tile, you have to
you have your
replace
backup.
the ablative.
Right.
So you'd have to you'd lose out on reusability because of the lost tile and
Right.
the ablative.
but you have a
But at least it's intact.
yeah.
And
You can recover it, refurbish it,
Yeah.
and get it back out on the fleet. That's cool.
And especially for carrying people, which ultimately we expect Starship to carry it maybe 100 people at a time to Mars, and also to the moon.
Yeah.
Then it's got to be super reliable. It's got to have ideally no single point of failure.
Right. So have you given up? A long time ago, you were talking about transpirational cooling or active
Yeah.
regen and stuff. Did that just kind of didn't make the trade, or?
The mass trade that we did, I think it's this point, like it's 4 years ago or something like that,
Yeah.
maybe 5. It seemed like at that time it would be at least twice as heavy as a ceramic heat shield. Now, since then, the weight of our ceramic heat shield has grown, and then
Yeah.
when you factor in the secondary shield, that's additional mass.
Right.
So I don't know. It may not be that big of a difference between actively cooling a heat shield and having ceramic tiles.
Have you seen what
Yeah.
Stoke Space out in Washington is working on, where they have it's of course Aerospike's going to come out of my mouth because for some reason Aerospike comes out every time I talk about anything, but it's a Aerospike, but the base plug is actually the active regen heat shield. And so and it's expander cycle. So as it comes back through the atmosphere, it's actually, heat. They're using hydrogen to actively regenerate, and cool the heat shield, and just gets dumped out the nozzles basically as it's going, and that actually also gets some of the gas gets vented out through the middle. So you also have like a boundary layer there too of gaseous helium or hydrogen in the front, and it's being actively regen. I think it's a really cool concept, and I was really impressed. It made me just think about like regen, active regen in a different way, and I thought that was pretty neat. But I know you guys had talked about the transpirational cooling years ago, so I didn't know if, yeah.
I think it's probably correct that a ceramic heat shield is going to do better than transpiration. There's also the question of like, if you go to Mars and you're coming in at hot and you're coming back to Earth, you're coming in. If you come back from Mars to Earth, you're coming in very hot.
Yeah.
It's not clear whether transpiration cooling could succeed there.
Up there.
Yeah.
Here's my wacky, dumb idea of the day is on the inside of the tank, if you had like a thermal camera You have like a fire hose with cryogenic coolant. Just spray if there's a burn through.
Sure.
Spray it down from the inside. I don't know. I'll always be happy to throw out the dumb ideas. Especially when you have header tanks there, that are filled with the cryo all pressurized, ready to go. All it's going to take is one heat shield tile missing potentially, and could have a bad day.
There's a lot of ways to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So, what matters is that it is solved.
Yeah.
Even though, there are many ways to achieve full reusability. What matters is that it is achieved.
Yeah, 100%.
And then, once you're in the sort of over the hump of full reusability, whether one system is slightly better than the other is a secondary concern.
Right. Yeah, it's tomato at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we keep moving along here?
Yeah.
So when with Flight 3, when it broke up, that was mostly just because obviously it couldn't maintain orientation, so it didn't even have a chance of having the heat shield.
You would have noticed that the engines, there was a lot of fire coming from the engines area, which is not that's not good.
Yeah.
On re-entry.
Right. Definitely
when
not.
the engines aren't on.
Yeah.
So this is you can see we're just finishing. We're trying to get the shell completed as quickly as possible, but we still have a lot of work to do on the interior of the factory. But this will dramatically improve the production of the rocket.
Yeah.
It's being able to move from one station to another, which is a linear adjacent flow.
I assume, I don't really know what that means, but.
Well, the thing that really matters for, people talk about the moving production line of sort of Henry Ford and the automobiles. What actually matters is linear adjacent flow, as opposed to a production line that moves.
So
it's simple.
Okay, yeah.
Like one step leads to another.
Yeah.
And things move along in a cadence.
Okay, yeah. Yep. And you don't have to have the physical.
It doesn't matter whether there's a conveyor belt or not.
Got it.
That's a secondary concern.
Got it.
Doesn't matter. It just matters that there's a tempo. So every station has roughly the same amount of work time.
Right.
And things move from one station to the next station, and the specialization of labor at each station.
Yes. Okay.
So these are the principles that actually matter.
And that's what you guys kind of solve by doing the tents first, because you could just willy-nilly rearrange things, see how things were actually falling, see what order things were going in.
But the tents were very inefficient once you know what you want to build.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So it was your 5-step thing of don't get too far along in the automation before you.
Yeah, you don't know what you're going to build.
Yep.
It's difficult to convey just how much this is. We don't even know what the rocket would look like.
Yeah.
So.
And in some senses, you still don't necessarily know. It's still changing.
At this point, we're confident that this architecture is at least one of the solutions.
Yeah.
That's not to say there couldn't be other solutions like the one you talked about, but that this will work.
Yeah.
It's just a question of ironing out the bugs, and improving the performance of everything from the engines to the avionics to the primary structure, the heat shield, everything.
Yeah.
But it will work.
Yeah.
I think I was mentioning, or I was beginning to say that the most important, the toughest remaining problem is a reusable orbital heat shield.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody has ever made a reusable orbital heat shield. So the space shuttle is the closest.
Yeah.
But that took, I think, something like 9 months and thousands of people to refurbish.
Right.
So it's difficult one cannot call something that requires so much work to refurbish as truly reusable.
Yeah.
It's certainly not rapid.
Yeah.
For the first time ever, there needs to be a rapidly reusable orbital heat shield, which no one has ever done. So it's a hard problem.
Right.
So that's why I'd say that's the number one biggest remaining problem, and the goal of this flight and really the flights for the rest of this year is get through the high heating, so the heat shield survives.
Yep.
And then the ship is still operational and is able to steer to a specific location and do a landing burn.
Yep.
in the ocean.
Yes.
And then the booster, we wanted to be able to, for this flight, to come back and do a landing burn at a specific location.
Yep.
So
do we know how far out is that going to be? Do you know?
It's pretty far out. I mean, but I think we're pretty close to that. If we don't solve it on this flight, I think we'll solve it in the next 2 or 3 flights. So just having the booster, do the hot staging, come back, do a boost back, steer correctly, and to a precise location and do a landing burn, and then and essentially do a simulated tower catch. So it's like,
so will the tower actually?
No, it's just a
okay.
The rocket will think it's not trying to get caught by the tower.
Right.
At least
I thought it'd be kind of cool if the tower mimicked it, out here, to make sure. Because I even wonder, like, how do we know the tower is going to be okay? Like after a launch like that, to be able to.
Well, we operate the tower after the launch, so we can tell if there's any damage.
Yeah.
But if this launch goes perfectly, we'll be able to. We'll have the booster do a boost back and a controlled aero controlled descent to a specific location.
Yep.
Initiate a landing burn, and be caught by an imaginary tower.
Yep. Yep.
And then the ship, if things go perfectly, which probably won't, it'll get through high heating. It will still be fully operational. It will control itself to a specific location and in the ocean, and then initiate a landing burn, and also pretend it's getting caught by the tower.
Wow.
Now, I think I think we've got maybe a 50-50 chance of the heat shield working.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's decent. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a high uncertainty, but like roughly 50-50. But if not on this flight, then in the next 2 or 3 flights, I think we'll solve that.
Yeah. Well, and you guys, let's kind of head over here. You guys did make a decent amount of changes to hopefully ensure re-entries better this time. Like you added some new roll thrusters.
Oh yeah.
And a few things like that.
Yeah.
What happened there that the roll thrusters got? Because they got clogged. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that was the old conversation we had of hot gas thrusters and all that stuff, or was it? Which still, I'm still confused because
they got ice. We think ice in the valves.
Okay, in the valves, not necessarily, or in somewhere along the stream.
They got clogged by ice. We're not sure exactly how.
Yeah.
But if water ice, we'll get into the oxygen side.
Mm-hmm.
There's a small amount, since we're the location that we're tapping off the engine is not pure O2. It's got a little bit of water ice.
Why does it have?
It's ox-rich gas.
It is ox-rich. So is it coming off the actual?
Yeah.
Like exhaust or the turbine side?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So wouldn't it have? Wouldn't it even have a little bit of?
It's ox-rich gas, but it's got burnt fuel.
Yes. Wouldn't it have a little bit of CO2 in it too then? And can that turn into an ice?
Yeah,
can you freeze CO2 at that temperature? Because I think.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's got stuff that can turn solid at cryogenic temperatures. The thing that's relevant.
Right.
So.
Yeah, ice, whether it be water ice or CO2 ice or whatever.
Ice.
Yeah.
And it's solid stuff that blocks
things.
Blocks things. So we've improved the sort of ice strainers or the ice catchers.
Yeah.
We've improved the valves. And something I think we'll do in the future is move to for critical valves, series parallel valves.
Mm-hmm.
So any one valve failure does not, no matter what happens, does not take out the ability of the ship to orient itself correctly.
So are you avoiding doing like a more of a traditional heat exchanger, like a round Raptor, like I think Merlin probably does that, where it has a heat exchanger just to heat up, to be able to provide ullage and stuff. Yeah. I'm curious, I've never heard of an engine using like already combusted to be able to be the ullage gas, like off the preburner. That's pretty unusual, I think, at least. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Our rocket is autonomously pressurized.
Yep.
So we're pressurizing the fuel side with gaseous fuel,
Yep.
and the oxide with mostly gaseous oxygen.
Yep.
Now, in the case of autonomously pressurized, we have to create the gas. We're not merely warming up a gas. We have to produce the gas.
Oh, interesting. Is that how the shuttle did it too then? Because the shuttle ran on the RS-25s had autogenous pressurization.
On the hydrogen side, yeah. I think that
I guess I don't know if it's on both.
was it on both? I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it was at least on the hydrogen side. Maybe on both. But when you have autogenous pressurization, you've got to produce the gas, not just heat it up.
Okay.
So there's a lot more mass you've got to come up with.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. It actually affects our max power especially on the fuel side. So the fuel pump has to work. Well, both pumps have to work harder, but the fuel pump especially is a limiting factor. Like if we turned off autogenous pressurization on the fuel side, we'd actually be able to get more power out of the fuel pump.
Oh yeah, because you're having to drive all that.
Yeah, you've got to gasify. Yeah, you're bleeding mass flow.
Right.
From the,
from the engine.
Yeah, from the engine.
Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a lot of work in taking a cryogenic liquid and heating it up to be a hot gas.
Right.
So you have a phase transition and that big temperature delta.
Yep.
So it's actually a lot of work to produce the hot gas from a cryogenic liquid.
That's crazy. So is that what also? Can we kind of step in here and see all the boosters? This is crazy. Is that what also was the blockage of the ox tank on the booster too? Then similar ice buildup blockage, or was it on flight 3 the Raptors were shutting down during boost back burn and had an ice buildup? Is it a similar thing to that?
Sorry, it's hard to hear you.
Yeah. Is that what caused the booster to shut down on flight 3 with the ice buildup? Was it a similar type of thing, like an autogenous pressurization issue that clogged a few of the engines?
Yeah, we didn't have enough pressure to start the engines.
Okay.
So we were low pressure start. The full answer is quite complicated, but because arguably we could have started with lower pressure, or we didn't need to start all the engines. Anyway, this time we expect to have a lot more pressure, and we are able to start at lower pressure, and we don't need to have all the engines fire.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So.
Jeez. This is crazy. Wow. The scale is just almost impossible to imagine and comprehend.
Three boosters.
Wow. That's just insane. This looks so cool. Dang.
A lot of engines.
Yeah. It's an insane amount of engines. I mean, right here we're looking at, 99 engines for these 3 vehicles.
Engines.
99 engines and
99 Raptors on a wall.
99 engines and a ship ain't one.
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane. The scale of these things, it's just hard to fathom. Wow. So you guys are trying to move down to 3 grid fins, is that right? From the 4, is that?
It's not a high priority. It's a mass optimization to move. You definitely only need 3.
Yeah.
And I think technically you could do it with 2, if you're willing to oscillate.
Yeah, like turn for yaw, then roll again for pitch. And
yeah, that's definitely, you're asking for a bit of trouble if you just have 2 grid fins.
Right.
But it is technically possible.
Right.
The 3 for sure. But that's a fairly minor optimization.
Right. With the cowbell diverter things, the ullage gas thrusters or whatever, I need to clear something up for myself because I'm getting confused. So cold gas thruster would be like a nitrogen thruster, where it's just literally compressed nitrogen goes out of a nozzle.
Cold gas is room temperature gas usually.
Is room temp. And then would we consider that almost like a warm gas thruster?
Yeah, warm gas thruster.
And then like a hot gas would be where it's a reaction, probably like a bipropellant thruster still.
But for both the booster and the ship, you don't really need much control. The attitude control needed is small. So you just can't have a leaky valve or a stuck valve.
Yeah, that seems. This is like the third time
Falcon is all cold gas.
What is?
Falcon is all cold
right,
gas. And we've done, I think, 6 starts. So it's cold gas that has been maintaining propellant settling and attitude control for 12 hours.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And you have a lot of it on tap. So that's. I don't know why that's still a hard one for me to fathom. Even though we've talked, this is the third time
It's got
now.
a lot of hot gas.
Yeah.
Warm gas.
Especially when it's empty. It's all warm gas.
The delta V needed is tiny, so some very tiny thrusters are needed. So
how much do you feel like after you fly? How much is it like? Oh God, we have to change all of these. Like, is it literally you find something on one and then you're literally like immediately having to make changes on all these things, like everything that's in production?
Yeah.
You're just
there's hundreds of changes
lessons
that actually take place, not a few.
Yeah.
Hundreds. If you go to a detail level, there might be thousands of changes that
Especially
happen.
when you get software involved, I'm sure it's
software for sure. I'm just talking
hardware.
If you just look at the hardware changes across the ship and the booster and the engines, it's thousands of changes between each flight. But many of them are very small. But a very small change could be a big deal.
Imagine how long it'd take a traditional aerospace company that had a rocket they're working on to make 1,000 changes between flights and then fly it 2 months later. I mean, that's what we're doing here. This is you're barely over 2 months from the last flight, and the vehicle's had over 1,000 changes.
Easily over 1,000, several thousand probably. So
that's insane.
Like I said, a bunch of them are little changes, but if you say like, is it different in a way that could have an effect on the rocket? Yeah. So it's probably several thousand.
And do you feel like for now, are you generally like kind of overbuilding them to just try to get through the point of being able to prove the heat shields, prove all the stuff, and then eventually you'll work on mass?
We're trying to answer the questions that I mentioned. The biggest question being, what does it take to get through max heating with a reusable heat shield? Then being able to have the booster come back and be caught by the tower.
Yep.
And have the ship also come back and be caught by the tower.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 very big things that need to happen.
And that's, in your mind, when you're launching these, including like flight 1, 2, 3, those are the questions, like those flights are just to answer those questions.
Full reusability.
See, I think people just don't understand that you're not looking at trying to get out there and launch a satellite tomorrow. You're trying to answer questions.
The payload for all the flights this year is data.
It's data.
Just to learn things. So it's design refinement to understand what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Some things sometimes work, which can throw you off because it worked once but doesn't work again because the combination of factors isn't the same.
Yep.
So you want to have the first things you'll find are like fundamental errors of design where success was not one of the possible outcomes.
Yep.
Then in some cases it's kind of like Russian roulette. Success is sometimes possible. But once in a while you blow yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's going to require a lot of flights to figure out like
those.
the 1 in 10 failure, the 1 in 100 failure, that kind of thing. There'll be a whole bunch of things like that.
Well, kind of even like the SN stuff, when 8 was darn close to landing, 9 was almost a reversion feeling, 10 was better, 11 was worse. Like there's a little bit of a ping pong as things were kind of being tried and tested, and you're still kind of in that phase, even at this scale. I just don't think people are used to that,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those like early tests were also just about us learning how to work with stainless steel as the primary structural element. Yeah, and working with liquid methane and with a full flow stage combustion engine as the engine. So a lot of what people saw was that the flight, did it land or not land? But we're just trying to figure out how do we work with steel, and how do we work with a methane as a fuel,
and a new engine architecture,
and a totally new engine architecture,
and new flaps, like things that are just
and do the flaps
new and novel.
Yeah, you have to actuate the flaps. You need very powerful actuators for the flaps because there are a lot of force. It's like an airplane moving its wings.
Right.
So these are very powerful actuators that are needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and all of the engine to vehicle interactions are very complicated.
Yeah.
So you don't really see those on the test stand. When you're firing the engines on the test stand, you don't get the engine to vehicle interactions. And then you got different engine to vehicle interactions in flight than you do on the ground.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when you're changing orientation of a vehicle and different G forces and zero G. I mean, all the things.
There's no test stand that can test a rocket at 17,000 miles an hour doing 6 Gs in every different orientation.
Right, exactly.
It's not possible.
Yep.
So
you have to fly it.
Yeah, you do as much as you can on the ground, then you got to fly it. Try to figure things out in simulation, but a lot of things are not going to be included in the simulation, so it'll work in some, but not in reality.
Exactly. It's crazy. Shall we keep moving?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
That'll work, yes, sir. We're just about to de-rig from the crane, and then we'll be able to cross the area.
Jeez. Wow.
Yep.
As you can see, the Raptor is a lot cleaner than it used to be. It looks like there's less stuff, but
Yeah. It's already.
yeah.
But these are still not like we're not to V3 here yet, right?
No.
Is the V3 the same thing as like the LEAT engine? Are those?
Sort of. The lead engine was, I think we will do that at some point, but that's really a total tear up.
Really?
Yeah. It looks like the lead engine, but it's way more expensive because it still has printed parts, for example.
Yeah.
So, but the next gen Raptor engine needs no heat shield.
Right.
So, and because it's exposed, it has to have cooling. So there's integral cooling circuits throughout all the parts. So it looks very simple on the outside, but it's complicated on the inside.
Like even all throughout the pre-burner and the gas manifolds and everything, it's
all that stuff you see stuck on the side disappears.
Wow. And that's actually that's being worked on now already. That's already.
Yeah, we have a design. that works. It looks like the engine isn't complete.
Well, yeah, you had that render on that presentation. And it just looked like literally like a
looks
first
like it's
attempt
missing
at mocking
parts.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually just the secondary circuits and integral cooling are part of each part. So,
wow.
So if you have a secondary cooling circuit, you run the secondary cooling circuit or secondary flow circuit through the various parts.
Right.
And we also eliminate a whole bunch of bolted and welded joints.
Wow.
So, especially the bolted joints, you really want to get rid of those.
Yeah.
You know, bolts and flanges and seals are hell, especially if they're hot. So yeah, the next gen Raptor engine is actually a little difficult to service because there are parts that don't have a flange anymore. It's just welded shut.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're just hoping to be able to get the design up to be so reliable, hopefully, that you just don't need to service it.
If you need
as
to change
often?
a part, you need to literally cut it open.
Wow. So you'll probably, at this point, you might as well just like swap out the whole engine, I assume, and just.
No, we cut it open.
Yeah?
Yeah. We cut it open. So.
Just
But
crazy.
I mean, there's a massive bolted flange for the hot gas manifold that's transferring hot gas from the fuel-rich hot gas from the fuel pump side.
Yeah.
You can see that. It's hard to point at because it's up in the air, but the thing that joins the fuel
the fuel
turbo pump to the aux turbo pump.
Yeah, the kind of band-looking thing.
Yeah,
right?
the band-looking thing. That has a monster flange at the top and bottom. And you want to get rid of those two.
And that's to hold a lot of pressure. Hot.
That's a whole lot of pressure.
Hot pressure.
Yes.
Jeez.
I mean, you can see there's a lot of flanges here. I mean, this valve is like, this pump is like made of flanges.
Wow.
Flange, 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 flange.
And
I mean, these are beast level flanges. Yeah.
And these are all, so there is no like active cooling inside of two like this, or the current version of Raptor like this. There's no.
Current version does not have, there's no, well, there technically is some, but there's not, the current version of Raptor does not have sufficient cooling to be able to resist being in hot gas plasma, like hot plasma. It's not, yeah, it would melt.
That's still why you need the shield here.
Yeah, that's why it's heavily shielded. But next gen, a bunch of the flanges you see here will disappear, and we'll have integral cooling and integral secondary flow circuits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys look? Is it possible to do?
There's a whole bunch of engines down there, pretty densely packed.
It's
a lot of thrust.
It's a lot of thrust. It's crazy. It looks like when you go to a Christmas tree store or something.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Each one of these is the most advanced rocket engine ever made.
And they're just being cranked out like it's nothing.
Yeah. Super high pressure, high efficiency. You got a full flow stage combustion.
All the
goods.
Insane. Yeah. Is there ever been any look into, like, I know, with aircraft turbines, you can do, like some kind of cooling on the actual turbine blades. Is there any way to do any kind of cooling on the turbine blades and Raptor?
We've had that discussion many times. We probably head back into the and see the main factory.
Jeez, I just can't believe how much has changed out here. You have 2 mega bays. I mean, last time I was out here, there's only 1 mega bay, and nothing had doors. Now you have doors. That's a pretty good feature comfort. It's turning into a real factory,
Yeah. Well, this is a real factory that we're building here.
Yeah.
So, quite big.
It's hard to keep up with everything out here.
Yeah, so this is we'll finally have a real factory for Starship. Not just making it intense. Yeah, so long term, we want to try to get the thrust of Raptor up to around 330, maybe a little higher, maybe 335 metric tons. So that'll take us to a 10,000 ton thrust at liftoff.
That's absolutely absurd.
Sorry?
That's absurd.
Yeah. It's
like absurd. Beyond absurd. That's coming up on 3 times the amount of power as the Saturn V.
That'll be roughly 3 times the Saturn V. Yeah.
But that's what you need.
Like 22 million pounds of thrust. The Saturn V is 7.5.
Oh my gosh.
So.
Absolutely insane. Well, and I think, there's this kind of feeling of why aren't people doing things like the Saturn V being built in the, engineered in the 60s.
Saturn V is primitive compared to Starship.
Yes, and it's insanely expensive. It wasn't sustainable.
Yeah. And it was expendable. So
yeah.
Starship is just any rocket that is fully reusable, which no one has achieved, because it is extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they didn't think about reusability.
Right.
So it was just too hard. So, and obviously we haven't achieved that either. We've got I'm hopeful that we will achieve it by next year.
Mm-hmm.
But at least we have a situation where we have a design where success is one of the possible outcomes.
Yeah.
So no prior design was success one of the possible outcomes for full reusability.
Well, and if you think about it, let's say you guys, for some reason, just were like, okay, screw it. We have to launch 300 metric tons to orbit. You could absolutely, you could expend a rocket if you absolutely had to for some reason.
Yeah, but it'd be pointless.
It would be pointless. But you have that capability. Like for the first time, since
yeah,
the Saturn
yeah.
V.
Well, I mean, generally, if you can do 200 tons reusable, you can do double that expendable.
Right, 400 tons.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is insane.
yeah.
I mean, even to the point of if you had to do, let's say you had to do, HLS or something to try to speed it up or something, to, if orbital refueling's not done or something.
No, orbital refilling, I mean, I don't really count chickens before they hatch, but orbital refilling is really just docking with ourselves.
Yeah.
We dock with the space station all the time.
Right.
A space station is way harder to dock with than ourselves.
But will it be all docking up to to like a depot? Is that kind of the plan? Is there to be an orbital?
It depends on how quickly you want to launch. So if you're going to the moon, I don't think you need a depot. I think you just send a ship up and send tankers immediately.
Yeah.
And your boil-off rate will not be too bad.
Okay.
So now for the moon, you'd want to have a dedicated Earth orbit to moon system because you don't need a heat shield.
Right.
Well, I mean a heat shield to brake, I suppose. Probably actually, yeah. The moon's like hotter than it seems because it doesn't have an atmosphere.
Right.
So you can't use the atmosphere to brake. So.
But if you have time,
I guess you probably have. Anyway, it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. For landing on the moon, obviously you don't need flaps, don't need a heat shield, and you need very little thrust.
Right.
But you do need pretty big landing legs.
Right.
So in case one leg lands on a boulder and one lands on a crater, and you don't want to tip over.
Right.
So.
Because that's I think HLS. I don't think a lot of people understand that we're going from a 16-ton lunar lander with the Apollo program to a, I don't even know how heavy HLS is going to be when it lands. It's going to be at, at least 10 times that massive, at least 10 times that massive, and acres of volume compared to anything that was landed during the Apollo program. And I just think that people aren't necessarily ready for how big Starship will be on the moon. It's basically a habitat when it's on the moon, It's not just a little tiny tent like the Apollo lunar landers.
Yeah. I mean, I think the next step is to go beyond Apollo and have a permanently occupied base on the moon.
Yeah.
Like Moon Base Alpha. That's the next step. So you don't want to just have a few people there for a few hours. You want to have a permanently occupied base.
Right. This factory's huge.
Yeah.
And I guarantee if we came back in a year, it'd be just up and running like a normal factory already.
I mean, this will be filled with equipment in 3 months.
Jeez. So is there a decent amount of new stuff that's is there hardware coming in here and tools that are coming in here that'll unlock just mostly production rate or even new ideas or what's that kind of like?
I mean, you can build any given design in an artisanal way, slowly, with by having a lot of crews come to the same station. But in order to have real production, you've got to move from one station to another, where you have the same amount of work at each station.
Right.
So this is meant to have a lot of stations. So you'll see a lot of work in progress.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to see very clearly, you guys, where the blockages are.
Mm-hmm. And make changes to it then.
Yeah.
Jeez. It's so funny to think about how, we were only 5 years ago out here when the Mark I and all you had was a tent and Stargate was the biggest thing out here, that little Stargate thing.
Yeah.
And now I almost missed it trying to pull into Stargate today because
Yeah, it looks like a little hut.
yeah, it's dwarfed by absolutely everything else out here already.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Oh, that feels nice.
Air conditioning.
Holy crap. It just keeps going.
Yeah.
I thought that was the main thing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So there was more behind that wall.
Yeah. Holy crap. So this is more of a real factory here. This is what the other side will look like.
The other side will look like this. There we're obviously just checking each tile to make sure it's not cracked and it's well seated.
How are you feeling about the way they're actually secured on there, like the mounting point? Is that
We're
decent?
continuing to iterate on the mounting point.
I mean,
it has 99% of the time it works well. So it's just a question of figuring out what are the 1% that have issues where it causes a towel to crack or some other problem.
I always keep thinking the one of the big challenges is that you can't access you can't access it from either side really. Like there's not a bolt you can screw on because you have.
It's a snap-on.
It has to be a snap-on.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the like furniture mountings where like you have two pieces of wood joined together and then you spin a magnet on one end it spins the nut on? I've always wondered like if something like that could be.
I mean, this
applied.
is basically, it snaps on and you pretty much have to break the towel to pull it off.
Really?
Yeah. That's meant to go on and stay on.
Yeah. Well, and we still see, like, even on the parts that aren't tapered up, like on the main body, we still see some horizontal seams. What's the deal with those seams? I know that was like pretty bad.
No, they don't really matter that much. They're just different sections of the nose cone. So, now, this is somewhat of a debate. You could wait until the whole nose cone is made, and then put the attachment points on at that point. Mm-hmm. So currently we put the towel attachment points on in sections.
Okay.
So that's why you've got a line.
The horizontal line, okay.
Yeah.
It's probably just a lot harder to, once it's all manufactured, it's just so massive, it'd be hard to put all the attachment points on. Is that kind of the problem?
There's more than one way to skin a cat. This is just a cat getting skinned.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's not to say that there is not a better way to do it.
Yeah.
There are. The first order of business is to get one way at all that works.
Yep.
Thereafter to optimize.
Yep. Watch your step here.
There's still a lot of work we got to do here.
Oh, that's cool looking. Is that the landing tank for?
Yeah, it's a header tank.
Header tank there. That's insane. Jeez. And then are those COPVs propped up against it like that then? Is that what those?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Got to pressurize the header tank with something, and the engine's on.
Exactly. Wow. So the like the Pez door that we see on Starship now, do you think that's going to stick around, or is there still going to be like a chomper someday, or is it?
Well, for the Starlink satellites, they're pretty flat, so
the chomper makes sense.
There's no point in having a giant fairing for a,
flat little.
It's a giant flat pancake.
Right. What did the door test go reasonably well on the last one, or because I think you guys aren't doing anything with it.
It had some issues.
Yeah. It's pretty rudimentary, of course, I assume.
Yeah. But it's wild that you've got this sort of really quite sophisticated factory on a sandbar by the Rio Grande.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like an alien spaceship landed.
Right. Seriously. So are these thrusters here then?
Yeah.
Is that what these are?
Little jetpacks. This will take the detailed stuff of the... that might run afoul of some ITAR stuff.
Deal.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if anyone is going to copy us. It's a hard thing to copy.
It's come a long way since 3 tons.
Yeah, it sure has. I mean, everything's clean in this. There's no mud and dust.
It's better when it has doors on it, yeah.
I mean, everything used to have mud and dust.
Yes.
And birds and things.
There's always some finite mud and dust, but it's much smaller than...
It's a long ways from
I mean...
Port One on
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Mark 1 thing, it looked like the junkyard in Tatooine.
Which was charming.
Yeah.
You know?
There was a lot of dust and mud.
Side
Yeah.
rocket.
The far side rocket. I mean, the Mark 1 was conceptual as a concept piece.
Yeah.
I'd say concept art.
It was
Yeah.
part of the journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So James pointed out that this actually wraps all the way around.
Yeah.
All of that still back
Yeah.
there. There's more to it.
Yeah. That's,
That's
that's the dome line.
Jeez.
Yeah,
That's the dome line?
Dome line. And the coils, that's the starter lines over there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so we do have an existing factory that's wrapped around the one you just saw.
So
That's where we make the ship and the booster.
So then that will open up and you'll start
Yeah.
serpentining it basically through there.
Yeah, that we'll take down that wall there. That is, once we have the doors on the other side, we'll take down that wall, and then you'll just have factory will just kind of go as far as the eye can see.
It's so much bigger than I thought. From the road, I mean, it looks big from the road, but it's insane. It's
And
ridiculous.
then obviously the sections get gradually bigger as you go south.
Right.
So that's why things start off sort of short and then get taller as you go along.
even the roof line does that,
Yeah.
right?
It's going to get bigger if the pieces get bigger.
That's absolutely crazy. Are you guys still using, like, I remember, back in the day, there's a lot of like Tesla motors being used.
Actually, you said that
Should we
way.
head out that way? Okay.
So
There's a lot of Tesla motors being used, like, for the fins and all that kind of stuff. And maybe even the grid fins had like literally a Model S motor or something. Are you still kind of using some Tesla parts like that?
yeah, we just use the Tesla drive units to actuate the grid fins.
And the big flaps still too, on ship?
Yes.
That's-
Sorry. Yes. Essentially, sorry, I was thinking about something else. Yeah. Hey. Yeah, we use we're trying not to use hydraulics. It's all electric actuation.
Yeah.
So the engine's also gimbaled electrically.
Yep. So you're really moving away from hydraulics wherever possible, really.
Yeah, I think there's actually no hydraulics in the vehicle. If there's hydraulics, it's some very tiny little part.
Huh.
But I think there is none.
That's wild, actually. I can't even think of another.
There's pneumatics.
Right. A lot. For all
Yeah.
the valves and everything, obviously.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Jeez. It's surreal compared to what it was
Yeah.
just a little bit ago. Wow. It just keeps going and going. That is crazy.
Yeah. From one little tent.
Yeah. This is starting to make Hawthorne look tiny, and Hawthorne's a big place. Well,
Hawthorne's actually a whole campus.
absolutely crazy.
That's Meme Street.
Meme Street?
Yeah.
Is that what it says now?
That's what it's called.
All right, I think we're jumping in a different car here.
But if you look at the street sign,
We got Meme Street.
yeah, it's literally called Meme Street. That is its official name. It used to be called Weems, and we changed it from Weems to Memes.
The important things. I love it. Holy crap, was that incredible or what? Huge thank you to especially Elon Musk for showing us around and following up and just teaching us so much about what's going on and showing us the inside. Huge thanks, amazing. And I also owe a huge thank you to our supporters, especially those over on Patreon. If you want to support the work we do here, head on over to patreon.com/everydayastronaut. And now is a great time to be a supporter because we already have part 2 up for review. So again, patreon.com/everydayastronaut to catch part 2 right now. But even if you're not a supporter, fear not. Part 2 is coming out once reviews are done, so be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. And while you're waiting, a good free way to support the channel is to just watch some recent videos that you might have missed, like other tours of companies or deep dives on alternate launch concepts. So click around, watch a few, it truly helps the channel out. And while you're online, be sure and check out our awesome merch store for shirts like this, our new orbital shirt, and lots of other incredible things over at everydayastronaut.com/shop. Thanks everybody, that's gonna do it for me. I'm Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut, bringing space down to Earth for everyday people.